You applied for your first academic job and you made the shortlist. Yay! So, what do you do from here? How do you make sure that you do not screw up the interview? And how do you ensure that you stand out from the competition? Well, keep watching because I'm going to tell you. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, and I've been supporting PhD students in UK universities for the last 20 years. And inevitably, there comes a stage on your PhD journey where you start thinking about applying for academic jobs, when you start applying for academic jobs. Now, when my students start to venture out there into the job market, I sit them down to have a little chat with them. And I cover two things in that chat. Firstly, I tell them how to put in an absolutely standout application, which I cover in the video before this one. And the second part of that chat is about how to come across really well in their interview. So that's what we're focusing on in today's video. And here are the topics I'm going to be covering. The process at this stage in the UK tends to be you go along for an interview with a panel of 2 or 3 people, and you also deliver some kind of presentation, normally to the staff team and a few of students. Now, this video is going to focus on the interview with the panel of 2 or 3 people, but if you want me to do another video on how you go about doing a presentation to potential colleagues and students, please do let me know in the comments and I will knock that up for you. The first tip that I want to share with you is know your audience. When you discover that you have been selected for an interview, find out who is on that interview panel. Okay, you need to do your homework. You need to go in there prepared. So if this information isn't included in the communication you get from the university, contact the person who told you that you'd been selected for interview and ask them who's on the panel. Now, normally the people on the panel will include somebody who would likely be your direct line manager. It will also include perhaps a professor from the department, somebody who's quite senior, who's quite experienced. And also you might have somebody from, the faculty or the college management team too. So someone like an associate dean, that kind of role. When you walk into that interview, you need to know who is going to be interviewing you. You need to be prepared for them and be prepared for their questions. So you need to do your research on your panel. Find out a little bit more about the people who are going to be putting you through your paces. You're going to end up with a few little notes on the people who are on your interview panel. And this can be a really good thing to boost your confidence before you go in there. So you know a little bit about them, you know a bit about their interests, you can put a name to a face. They become more human to you. They're not these kind of recruitment robots. So it can put you at ease. It can help you go in with a little bit more confidence than you would if you haven't got a clue who's interviewing you, because if you do that, you might get caught off guard. Next up, you need to be prepared for their questions. Now, there are going to be some standard questions and there are going to be some specific questions. So let's deal with the standard questions first. Across most academic roles, there are always going to be a set of questions that you will be asked no matter what role you're applying for. And those questions include, firstly, why have you applied for the job? And secondly, why are you the best person for the job? Now, in terms of your responses to these questions, my advice is very similar to the advice I gave in the first video, and that is that ego is not your amigo. This is not your opportunity to say how wonderful you are. Okay, that might naturally come up, obviously, when you're talking about your skills and your attributes, but essentially what you are trying to do here in answering these questions is make it clear to the panel how your expertise and your experience and your skills fits with what the university need from you in this role. So how do those two things come together? So it's about the fit between you and the institution, and it's also about timing. Why is now the perfect time for you to come and be of service to that university and the people within it? What are you bringing to the party? Why are you and this university a match made in heaven right now? So here you want to draw on the research that you did when you were putting your application together. So you want to be thinking about the core values of that institution and how they align with yours. You want to be thinking about the areas of research that this university is active in and how that fits with your own interests. You also want to consider the demographics of the student body. Is there anything particularly appealing about teaching this group of students, and in terms of what you can do for this group of students? Moving on to the specific questions, which will be about the individual role that you've applied for. What you need to do here is go back to the job ad, the job description, and go through it and look at exactly what it is they require you to do within that position. This is going to be really helpful for you in terms of anticipating what their questions are going to be. So that document, that job description, it is full of clues. So please make the best of it. Go through it with a pen, with a highlighter, writing in the margins what particular question might crop up that relates to this or that, or how particular parts of that job description come together. You're smart, you can figure that out, but I would also say that it is absolutely worth talking to your PhD supervisor or somebody that you know within your current institution and just asking them, like, what kind of questions do you think I might get asked about this particular role? Because when you talk to your supervisor or other colleagues, these people likely have some form of experience about the recruitment process. They would have been on interview panels themselves, they would have applied for academic jobs themselves. They will be able to give you some valuable help here. So please do draw on the people around you. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. One tip that I would give you relates to when you get asked about your weaknesses or things that you feel you could improve on. Please don't say this in response to that question.
My biggest weakness is that I'm such a perfectionist. I just love my job. I love my work. I give up all of the fun stuff in my life so I can selflessly devote myself to your service.
The thing that makes people quite cautious when they hear candidates saying this kind of thing is that increasingly these days, academic burnout is being recognised as the problem that it actually is. And it is no longer considered a badge of honour to be somebody who works, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. So please do not go into an interview claiming that you are this work robot, because the panel are not going to be impressed by that. Instead, focus on something that you do genuinely want to develop, and then follow that up with a reference to why this institution is a good place to do that, or with a question about what opportunities there are at this institution to do that. So, for example, you might say that you want to get better and more confident at writing for publication, and you've noticed that a lot of people within this university have got very impressive track records of getting their work published. Then you might want to follow that up with a question about whether there are any writing mentoring schemes within this particular place. Alternatively, you might say that you've always been a bit hesitant to try out new things in your teaching. Then you could ask about the opportunities that there are at this institution for trying out new or innovative things. When you're doing this kind of thing, you are demonstrating self-awareness, okay? You are demonstrating a bit of humility here. You're not coming in saying, oh, I'm an expert at everything, I'm perfect, employ me. You're saying, hey, yeah, there are these things that I would want to get better at, but you're going a step further than that. You are actually identifying good things about this institution which potentially can help you to do so, and you're asking questions about that. So it's good all round. On the topic of specific questions, always make sure that you have your own questions that you want to ask at the end, because this happens in every interview situation, doesn't it? You get to the end of the questions that the panel want to ask you, and then they say, is there anything you'd like to ask us? Don't sit there and go, no, I'm fine. Make sure that you actually have some questions prepared. What are you interested to find out about working at this institution? You have got on this interview panel 2 or 3 very senior members of staff in front of you, so make the most of that. You might have some specific questions that you've already thought about, or you might have more general questions like, can you tell me what it's like to work at this institution? What's your favourite thing about working here? Was there anything that surprised you when you started working here that you hadn't anticipated? What opportunities are there here to do X, Y, or Z? I would also strongly advise you to set up some kind of mock interview before your actual interview for the job. And you can have this with your PhD supervisor. You could go and approach a member of staff from the department that you're currently studying in, somebody that you trust, somebody that you like, and just ask them to conduct a mock interview with you and go through a series of questions that are likely to come up in an interview for this kind of role. This is such a helpful thing to do because when you've been preparing for your interview, you've often just written things down and you've got notes that are on the kind of things you want to talk about, but you've never actually spoken that out loud. Now, a mock interview is helpful in picking out those things that you might want to tweak and the things you might want to change, because when you say something out loud verbally, it often sounds very different from how it appeared on a piece of paper. So it can be a really good little warm up just to iron out any of those particular things. And ask them for feedback, for development points from this mock interview, because they will notice things that you are doing that you don't realise you're doing that you need to stop doing. They will also be aware of things that you should be doing, which you are not currently doing. So there are lots of little insights that you can get from a mock interview. So please do try and arrange one if you can. Right then, post-interview mistakes. This is really important. Please don't do any of these things. After your interview, what you should not do is contact any of the panel members directly. This is a big no-no. Okay, it looks really unprofessional, and it looks like you are trying to suck up to them, and it just creates a terrible impression. You might want to follow up and say thank you, for the opportunity for the interview, and the best person to contact for that is the person in HR who initially contacted you to let you know that the interview was taking place, that you've been successful and you've been shortlisted. They are your best point of contact. I would avoid contacting any of the panel at all, okay, because it looks bad, and you don't want to undo any of the hard work that you've done. Do not post about it on social media either. You do not need to communicate to the world that you went for an interview at University A today. We don't need to know that, okay? So just quietly go about your business. You don't want to kind of rattle any cages or ruffle any feathers. You just want to go, okay, I've had my interview, I was prepared, I went in, I gave it my best shot, and now I am just going to sit and be patient and wait to hear the outcome. Now, if you are successful, that is great. Celebrate, treat yourself, tell everybody about it. But also be a bit careful with that as well, because sometimes universities want to announce new appointments internally first. They want to tell their staff team about it before anything is announced kind of formally externally. So if you are the kind of person who does like to post all over social media about everything you're doing all the time, which is fine, you do you, just check with that university before you do that. Say to them, when you hear that you've been successful, ask the person who contacts you, is it okay if I post about this on social media? If you're not successful, don't kick off about it. I talked about this in the previous video when we were talking about putting in an application and not being shortlisted and kind of dealing with the emotions that come up there. It's the same for when you get to the interview stage and you've not been successful. Don't kind of react immediately and, have a tantrum, essentially. You might not have the job, but you have contact with that institution now. You have met the people there. You have applied for this role. You are in their orbit. So it is very often the case that if you're not successful with this particular job, but if the panel liked you, if you fit their criteria, but you were second place and you didn't quite make it, there could possibly be other opportunities that will come up fairly soon. And it is sometimes the case that people don't have to go out to interview again. They can draw on the existing pool of people that they had for a particular position for one that comes up within, X number of weeks or months of the recruitment process taking place. So you've got to be really careful with how you react to that news that you haven't got the job. Because if you don't go about it in a professional way, it can compromise and jeopardise other opportunities that you might have at that institution. There may well be other opportunities that they consider you for, whether that's in the next few months or even in the next few years after you've gone and got a job at another university. So please don't undo the hard work that you've done in building those relationships by losing your poop when you don't get in at the first opportunity. Also, you've got experience of the recruitment process now. You've gone through the whole system at this particular university. You've applied, you've been shortlisted, you've been interviewed. You can learn from all of that. You can go back and you can reflect on how you handle particular parts of the process. You can identify things that you want to change. It's all an opportunity to learn. It is all an opportunity to grow. It will all work out for the best in the end. It really will. And I just want to tell you a little personal story as a side note here. I got turned down for an academic role at a very prestigious institution about 15 years ago. And I was devastated. I was absolutely gutted because, you know, I thought I'm going to get in here and then this is going to happen and everything's going to be fantastic. And then when I didn't get in, oh, I was crushed. But it wasn't the end of the world, because the job that I went on to get later turned out to be the job that opened all kinds of doors for me. And it gave me a career that I could never have imagined having had I got in at that prestigious university. So things do really work out for the very best in the end. And whether you believe in, you know, the universe has your back and all of that stuff, I do. But that's, I think, something that you really do need to remember. Just because one thing doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. It's all happening for a reason. And that largely is because there's something even better just around the corner. So treat these failures to get jobs as a warm-up for the main event that is absolutely going to happen. So just keep the faith, okay? Things will work out in the end. So to sum up, the key things that you need to remember when you're being interviewed for an academic post are: know your audience, prepare for the general questions, prepare for the specific questions, do a mock interview, and avoid post-interview mistakes. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll be back very soon with another video on how to navigate the ups and the downs of PhD life.